Okay, Josh, you ended part one telling us that catastrophe struck with Mrs. Pipe's garden, and that you decided that to
Not be a gardener.
not to be and to do well in the industry, you needed to be a bit more than what you were already doing. So you've applied for lots of jobs. What happened next?
I didn't get one of them, and I think it was that. Obviously, I left school at 16. I did have GCSEs, and I've got a weird name. I ain't got any A levels. Never been to university, and the day I got turned down for an interview to be the clerical assistant at Market Raisin Racecourse was the day I decided I needed to do something myself, and then spent a heck of a lot of time looking at what that could be. There are two things, and most of the ideas, I write thousands of business plans, and have thought about thousands of different businesses, and there's usually two reasons behind why someone hasn't done what you're proposing to do. Firstly, that no one's ever thought of it before, and that's probably 0.1% of the reason. The 99.99% of the reason why it's not been done before is because it's unprofitable. So you think about a heck of a lot of stuff. So I launched my own business called Racing Link, which was a stand that went around every single racecourse in Britain promoting British horse racing. I think everything that I've done in my career has been it's been passionate, and it's been about promoting the sport of horse racing in some way, shape or form, and in different guises. So this had a unit that went around every single racecourse promoting horses for sale, free bets with leading bookmakers, trips to the Arc de Triomphe, and it was like an information unit, and people paid to have their information on there. Good idea, and it lasted for 3.5 years, I think it was. But then when the first round of foot and mouth hit and racing stopped, and my deal was that we would be on the racecourse three days a week, and we couldn't go and sell that, I had to find something else to go and do.
And that something else in 2002 was Betfair.
It was, and they're actually linked, to be honest with you. One of my last clients through the door was a new startup internet business, and they said they've got enough money in terms of marketing for 6 months with me, which was £3,000, and 6 months in the Racing Post. And they rang me back and said, could we pay in instalments to help cash flow? So this is, we are talking about Betfair. So they paid me £500 a month for the last 6 months that the business was around. And on closing the business, I got a phone call from them saying, we've got an advert in the Racing Post coming out for a head of marketing this Saturday. Would you apply? You know, the business was really geared up, as we all know, for 2 or 3 event sports in terms of getting liquidity into those 2 or 3 results. But of course, racing happens all the time, so it became a lot more. It was set up for one side of sport, and actually, racing came through, and they needed someone with racing experience. And tootled off and had an interview with Bert Black and Ed Ray and a few others, and arrived there when it was small fledgling business, and the rest, they say, is history, really.
And in that history, there's any particular achievements that you're most proud of at your time with Betfair?
Most proud of, I think probably the number one was I came up with the idea and obviously launched the Betfair Chase, which still sits proudly in the jump racing pattern today. I did it alongside Adam Waterworth, who's now the Supremo at Goodwood. He was at Haydock at the time. We were seeing Best Mate run round over the wrong trip, the wrong way round on the wrong track in the Peterborough at Huntingdon. I was saying there's got to be an event that we can, a race that we can put on at the start of the season for our Gold Cup horses. And there's a it's used too often now, but there's a road to Cheltenham there. And so we came up with the idea of the Betfair Chase. We then came up with the idea of the Betfair Million for doing the sort of Triple Crown. And interestingly, we never actually got Best Mate to run in it, but it really did capture the imagination. Corto Star went and won the Million, which was fantastic. And I see that Jockey Club have now got the Jockey Club Million. They've bought that back, and I think this year, the people were saying, there was only 5 runners at this year's renewal. It's probably but they had the biggest crowd that they had since it started, and I don't think you need 20 runner handicaps to make a spectacle. If you've got 5 prime top of the range horses, which we did have, I thought it was a great race, and to see Bristol Mai go and do it again was great.
It's going to be a silly question, but did you anticipate how big the exchanges were going to be and how they're going to affect racing at the time?
Again, I'm going to go back to the thing that I've never done a job where I haven't had passion for it. I'd rather go and earn next to nothing and go and ride out or muck out for someone until I found a role that I had passion for. So I wouldn't have gone and worked for a traditional fixed odds bookmaker, being frank. When I saw the product of Betfair and what it was trying to achieve and modernise and new, that's what attracted me to it. I think by going there, I also, without being big-headed, bought a bit of legitimacy in terms of in horse racing, what the Betfair product was. It was a hot potato, you know. Government were going after it. Bookmakers, fixed odds bookmakers were going after it. But if Josh went there, it can't be that bad because he would never do anything that's negative towards horses and or horse racing, or the horse racing industry. So I think those are the ones that, when that did happen, that I do think it's good for the game. It does modernise, but the sport and the bookmaking industry needed to modernise around it. They sort of to a new level in terms of Betfair, and everyone's sort of worried about it rather than going, okay, how does that sort the industry out, or how does the football pitch change now that they've come around?
So would you concede that the betting exchanges were maybe, in hindsight, a genie that should never be let out the bottle?
No, not really. I think it's modernisation. We look at it today. There are so many different bookmaking models out there today. Bet365 bookmaking model is completely different and a completely different margin level to the likes of Sky Bet and Paddy Power, the number 2 and 3 in the game in terms of online bookmakers. They're not all one-trick ponies. I think the exchange. I'm sad to see the liquidity levels now of the exchange from what it once was. But that's developed, you know, and the exchange world is about an ecosystem and an ecosystem of punters, and you need lots of small fish in there for the big ones to feed off. And unfortunately, that on Betfair, everyone goes, oh, it's the pros way to bet and that kind of stuff. I think the customer journey when it comes to fixed odds, you're looked after very well. You're giving free bets and bonuses along the way, and on the exchange you can come in and you can lose your wallet pretty quickly because there are some sharp cookies out there. And I think there's a lot of education. When I was there, we bought out a book which was Betfair for Dummies, like the Windows for Dummies book, and it is about educating people on a new system rather than tipping so many people into the pot at the top and then just falling away after losing very, very quickly.
So one of the most controversial decisions of recent years by Betfair, the premium charge. Now, is that justifiable?
I have to say I left before the premium charge came in. It wasn't because the premium charge came in that I left, but I'm not a fan of it. I think that there is a place for professional punting, and Betfair was it as well. People were running a business off it, but to go and charge them a ridiculously huge percentage of their profit after they've won on a system, a lot of people disappeared. A lot of algorithms and a lot of ways people bet disappeared off there. So there must be a level between the two. If you want to make more money from that segment of the customer base, I think there was a lot better ways of doing it than just whacking on a big taxation at the end of the year. And the reason why I say that is I've got good friends that used to be key accounts at Betfair or on the exchange, and they're placing bets all over the place. So in terms of their P&L as a person, is completely different to what their P&L is on Betfair. So they could be laying and looks like they're making a lot of money on Betfair, but they're actually backing it with other firms, and it doesn't take into account the two. So I think that they would be willing to play over here, and it shouldn't be that they've got a free place to play and just make money. But there should have been probably a bit more thought around it. But we are talking, the premium charge has been around for nearly 10 years now, so we are talking about a decade ago.
Now, you left Betfair because, I quote, it got too big for you. Now, what did that mean?
At the time, it lost its entrepreneurial spirit. I went there when there was, 30 or 40 people there, and I left when there was 1,500, and there was just too many. The business could have run on 800, to be honest with you, and I think Brian Corcoran arrived 3 or 4 years after me and restructured the business and brought it back down to around about the 1,000 people level. And beforehand, when it was young and there was a great team there, I'd have probably been a bit naive. I was probably naive to think that it was always going to remain with that entrepreneurial flair. But you still see a lot of the big .coms in Silicon Valley that have that entrepreneurial flair. But if the phone went, no one asked who, no one worried about who it was. You'd pick the phone up, and eventually people were saying, "Oh, it's not my job," or "This is my job," and staying quite close to it. So before I sort of started falling out with it and falling out with the people, I left on really good terms, and I have to say I did a lot of deals with Betfair when I moved into my next role, and on from there. I'm still own horses with Andrew Black and others, and we have the old Betfairians with Martin Cruddas and Steve Moranis, and some great guys that and females that I've known from those days that we are still staying in touch with now.
So you're one of the pivotal people in growing the business. Did you walk away with it with a few quid?
We didn't start with a few quid. The great thing about starting a business is you're the ones that take the risk. So if it does come off, then I think it's great to see a lot of my successful friends are self-made, that have gone and they've taken the risk and not paid themselves. Look at Royce Racing, we didn't pay ourselves for 2 years to get the thing going. So when it comes to Betfair, yes, we did, but when we first started, we didn't get paid a lot. We got paid in shares. So if those shares turn out in 5, 6, 7 or 8 years' time after the event to be worth a few quid, which they were, but when you own horses, it soon leaves the account as fast as it comes in, I can tell you.
Right, when you left, you went on to be Chief Executive of the Professional Jockeys Association. Now, after the upwardly mobile Betfair business, was that like a step back, at least financially?
I say again, I've never done anything for money. It's a secondary thing, and if you do something that's passionate and it's got potential, the money will follow. If you ever go out there chasing cash, it will never come. So what I saw in back then, it was called the Jockeys Association of Great Britain was what it was called as I went, and I was going through a time where I was thinking, that my life at Betfair was, and I'd moved to Lambourne, and I'd sort of decided I needed a change, and we'd just had Finn, who was 2 years old, and I was commuting into London, and Abby, my wife, turned around and said, if you could do anything in the sport, what would you go and do? And knowing that you want to go and make a difference somewhere, and I said, tell you what, I wouldn't mind giving the old Jockeys Association job a go, because I think the jockeys are the stars of the sport. They can speak rather than neigh, so we can get them a lot more media savvy than they are. We can modernise it, get some commercial cash in there. There's all sorts of stuff, and she could see that there was, I was off and I was having ideas. And I kid you not, 3 days later there was an advert in the Racing Post for the chief exec of the Jockeys Association. So went in there, and yes, it was a bit like going back to my old school. There was school days in a comp. I not only rebranded the organisation, I rebranded the office. It became the Professional Jockeys Association. New logo, new badge. But when you came into the office, which was used to be quite dark and what have you, I painted it all white. There was a big sign with a horse sort of coming through at the top of the stairs saying "Welcome to the PJA," and just sort of putting some energy into the place. And I think the main thing that I did there was I realised that these guys, the only people that go, as you've heard it before, that the only people that go to work and have an ambulance follow them round whilst they're doing their job, and they didn't have a doctor. And prior to my arrival, I think 4 jockeys had left hospital with broken necks in the previous 2 or 3 seasons. That's not the hospital's fault. That was also the education of jockeys, that if you keep turning around and saying I'm fine, you're not going to get an MRI scan. So there was education there that needed to happen, but equally we needed our own jockeys doctor. So I ended up going to the Injured Jockeys Fund and saying, one, why haven't they got a doctor? And surely it would save you cash if they're looked after properly through their careers before they then become, hopefully not, but an injured jockey at the end of it. And they said, well, no one's really written a proper paper on it, Josh, and we wouldn't just hand out cash, but we would match fund. So we decided that, so I went away from that, took that info and went, I tell you what, went to saw Betfair. They had a great charity budget. Betfair backed it. I got a doctor to write the paper, and I kid you not, within 2.5 weeks, I was back at the Injured Jockeys Fund with £350,000 worth of backing that needed matching. and a proper medical paper. And thank God it came about.